There we go. Hi, everybody. Sorry about that technology snafu. I'll get it one day. Welcome to our September UPCA webinar. I'm working really hard to stop saying that I'm so excited about stuff. So, how about I'm thrilled that you're all here today. It's going to be a great webinar. We've got a really great lineup of speakers and really great content to share with you. But before we jump into that, I have a few things to share with you. I just want to remind folks to save the date, of course, for our upcoming PopCon, October 21st down in St. George, and then Fall Conference, the October 22nd through the 24th, also in St. George. Registration is open, so please come. Hope to see you there. And a little plug for UPCA, we're doing a breakout on Wednesday at 10:45. We've been assured by the conference planners that we will have a much larger room this year. So please come to our breakout. It's going to be a lot of fun and a lot of really great information and a wonderful opportunity to network with other coalition coordinators and prevention folks. So please come if you can. It's called the Status Quo Shakeup. So should be a lot of fun. And then I also wanted to remind everybody that awards are now open, award nominations for the Merlin Good Prevention Award and the Coalition of the Year Award. So please nominate folks that you know that are deserving of some recognition. And we can send that link out again and try to find information of the past awardees. I know that's a lot of people have emailed and said, well, who's won this award before? So I'll try to get that information for you and include that in the email. Oh, nominations are closed? Snap, that was fast. All right, never mind, you guys. Hey, be thinking about next year. Be thinking about next year's awards. Man, okay. Another thing I wanted to mention, save the date for Winter Summit, January 20th and 21st up in Ogden, and Prevention Capitol Hill Day, January 26th. And we'll send all these dates out so that you have them written down in an email, but a lot of really cool stuff coming up. I also wanted to mention that we're still looking for a funding chair on the UPCA Exec Committee. So if you know anybody that is passionate about sharing information about grants and teaching people how to write for grants and finding alternative sources of funding and just thinking outside of the box when it comes to funding, we'd love to have you. So please send us an email with a nomination or volunteer yourself. We are in desperate need of help. Yeah, come join us. And speaking of the executive committee, a few months ago, we held our Utah Youth Prevention Summit down in Bryce Canyon, and we had the opportunity to speak to a lot of youth coalition advisors, a lot in our advisor meeting. And one of the things that we heard from many of the advisors is that they love the opportunity to network with advisors from other coalitions and they'd love to do it more than once a year. And so the idea was born that we would create a new position on the UPCA Exec Committee that would help facilitate trainings and networking opportunities for Youth Coalition advisors. So we'll be sending out an email in the next week or two specifically to Youth Coalition advisors. But we're really excited about this. So in addition to our normal monthly webinars, we'll be holding quarterly webinars with information specific to Youth Coalition advisors. Anybody is welcome to come, but the information will really be geared to helping youth coalition advisors sustain and retain their youth coalitions and just networking together and asking about tips and tools and things that work in their area. So it should be really great. But we will need someone to help be the chair of that committee on the UPCA. So if anyone is interested, please let us know. Like I said, we'll send out an email, but we'd love someone that has been on a youth coalition themselves or is a current youth coalition advisor to really help us get like insights on what youth coalition advisors need. And the idea is we'll hold these quarterly trainings and then we'll also meet before Prevention Capitol Hill Day so we can make sure everybody is on the same page and really help each other out. So it should be really great. And we're really excited about it. Oh, I said excited. We're really thrilled about it. So one last thing, I'm sure you guys have seen the email, but we're working on some evaluation. So we sent out a member survey just a few weeks ago, and we've gotten quite a good response, but we'd love more feedback. As you know, evaluation is an important part of the coalition process. So please take a moment, do that survey, and we're going to draw 10 names from the completed surveys and hook you guys up with a UPCA swag bag full of really cool UPCA branded items to thank you. So we'll send that link out as well, but we'd love your feedback. Um, and I think that is it for me. Sorry, that's a lot of information, but I am really excited about I'm sorry, I'm really excited about today's content and the folks that are presenting. So we are going to be hearing from Julie Anderson, who is our policy chair from Weber Morgan. Then we're going to hear from Logan Reed from Southwest. And then we're going to hear from Susanna Burt, our UPCA vice chair, also from Weber Morgan. And then we're going to round things up with Kiana Dipko, who is our PR chair from Mill Creek. And they're going to talk to us about policy work and strategies and things that you can do in your community. And then, of course, we'll have time at the end for questions. But if you have any questions during the presentation, please raise your hand or come off mute and ask questions. I know all these presenters would love to feel like they're answering questions and interacting with you rather than just like lecturing you. So without further ado, let me go ahead and share my screen and turn the time over to Miss Julie. Come on, stinker. Here we go. I'm really struggling with technology today. Sorry, you guys. Ha ha! I've done it. All right, Julie, it's all yours.
Okay, so we've had like quite a few questions about policy and how to do it, how not to be scared, what you can do, what you can't do, um, what works where and when. And so, as a committee, we decided we talk to you today about just a bill, the big P and the little p policies. Next slide, please. So, we sometimes tend to just focus on policy at a specific level. It might be state level or federal level. That seems to be where most of our angst sometimes comes from, and sometimes where our good news comes from. And a lot of times we do it just during the legislation, of course, which is January to March. It's going to be a rough morning. I can tell already. January to March. But the legislation doesn't actually close down officially. They continue starting, I believe it's in May, with interim. And this is a lot of times when bills are introduced and given kind of the early lead in being able to become a bill. And so sometimes it's easier if we follow that. And I'm sure there's ways that we can teach all of that to you. We just don't have enough time today. But anyway, we're looking to do more environmental strategies. Environmental strategies are economic and have a large impact on community health. Next slide, please. So I get to start. Bear with me today because I'm going to get emotional, but it's a good emotion. And I'm trying not to. So I've read through this several times, but it doesn't matter how many times I read it. So bear with me on this one. I actually started my journey into policy work in 2012 with a bill called the Oberjoe's Bill. Um, and this was a heart that started with a grandma wanting a fight for justice. It didn't begin in a courtroom or a committee. It began with a heartbreak. And this heartbreak was because of a mom who at that time was struggling with substance abuse, substance misuse. And unfortunately, in making some decisions that she did, she caused a car accident that involved the death of my granddaughter. And I'm going to share her with you because I love to share her. So hopefully you can all see this. But this is Aubrey Joe. I'm trying. Okay, I think that's most probably clear enough. This is my sweet Aubrey Joe. Stop it with the hearts, please. You'll lose me. Um, this picture was taken about 3 months before she died. It was the very last picture. He chose the pose. We had been in a custody fight for this sweet little girl. And it wasn't that we wanted the mom not to be involved, that the dad should be all involved. We wanted the commissioner to hear us and understand that what was best for the child was what we needed. And it didn't seem to matter at that time how much information we shared on mom's problems. The commissioner was absolutely rigid on um, the best place for the child is with the mother. Am I saying that's wrong? No, I'm not. But sometimes is it really? And unfortunately, she stuck by her guns. Um, and she ended up um, not even really listening to my son in court, not even allowing him a voice. And obviously, not Aubrey Joe had no voice because she was not in that hearing. And after we were done, we ended up with something that we felt was comfortable in protecting Aubrey Joe. We took a stipulation, and in it, we decided that we would take her every weekend from Thursday night until Monday morning. And mom was happy with that because it allowed her to do the things that she wanted to do on a weekend. And then mom would pick her up on Monday and she would then bring her back Thursday night. Um, I, as a grandmother, did not really feel that this was going to save my little Aubrey Joe. And unfortunately, about 3 weeks after the decision was when we lost our sweet Aubrey Joe in a terrible car accident. The mom survived. She has served her time in the state penitentiary. But for me, it was, I just didn't understand why um, my son was not considered, why the mother was the best thing. This was a new experience to me. And I just couldn't understand why there was none of that allowed. And so um, I decided I was going to look into it. Can I tell you, I didn't know where to start. I had no idea where to start. I just wanted the child and both parents to be considered and what was in the best interest of that child. So I reached out. So can you go to the next slide? And I thought, who do I talk to? Who do I talk to? And I actually reached out to a dear friend. Her name is Renee. She is a professional lobbyist, um, very good at what she does. But she was the one that knew all of this stuff. And so I reached out to her. We had a very good conversation. And she said, let me think about this and see where we can go. And she did some research and she came up with what we finished as a bill. What we discovered is that in the custodial laws, the word gender was not part of that language. And she felt like it was an easy change. But I said, so, okay, that's great. How the heck do we do that? We all say that, right? We see a bill that we're concerned about, and we all go, yes, what? How do we do this? And so she introduced me to our local legislature, Ryan Wilcox. And it doesn't, for me, it was interesting. I'd never met Ryan. And so being able to talk to him and present to him and to feel his concern and his worry as we did that. Now, sometimes your local legislature may not have the ability to help you with what you're presenting. We wanted it on custody. Um, and he might say to you, I'm sorry, but no, that's not going to work. But he's not the only legislature. So you can go out and identify other legislatures. The website le.utah.gov is amazing. You can find anything you want on there. So we reached out to Ryan and he started the process for us. And as you can see, we also talked to others. We got advocates, we got family members, and we also got two amazing women called Kim Christopherson and Casey Stallone. I've never met these beautiful people, but they they heard about what was going on through Renee and asked to meet us. And can I say, they were truly the advocates and the people that I needed on my side to move forward, to give me the strength that I needed. And on top of that, we also use co-sponsors of legislature to help us with this bill. It just gives you that strength that you need to, because it's like, oh, it's not just a senator and a House rep that's doing this. There are others, and we had several of them, and I will name them a little later. So can you move to the next slide, please? So when you're navigating a legislative process, knowing where to take your bill is just as important as what's in it. So you really have to choose your committee wisely. Um, this committee needs to have skin in the game. In other words, the right policy, excuse me, gotta find my words. Um, a good way to have the skin in the game is a sponsor who is on that committee, a member of that committee, because guess what? They have skin in the game for you. For example, you don't take a custody law to the education committee unless it's related to schools. And vice versa, you don't take education policy to you don't take oh, sorry, my mind just totally to the judiciary permit. You don't take education policies to the judiciary because guess what? They have no idea because that's not what they deal in. And they really don't want to touch school problems or anything like that. So the bottom line is between policy gets attention when policies align. The right committee can be different between a bill that stalls and one that moves forward. And it is so very true. If you have the right committee, you can get that momentum. Um, can you go to the next slide, please? I know I'm kind of going through this. Um, so I'm going to talk a little bit this leading into this. It was like, what committee did we use? Well, it actually a bill has to start in the House Rules Committee because guess what? It has to be given a name. It has to be given a number. If you notice, when bills are given a number, it's either has a HB in front of it or an SB. HB being a House bill, SB being a Senate bill, and it has to be given a name. Just like we need names, right? How would we talk to each other if you go, "Hey, you"? This is the way that people know how to find the bill is with the number. And so we actually took it to the House Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice Committee. Reason? Ryan Wilcox was at the time was the chair of that committee. So it was like, okay, we're good. And so we took it there. We took it to the oh, sorry, House Rules
I
Committee
just
to get
made
a
the
name and
notes
a
on there.
number.
Sorry, I didn't put it on
Okay.
the slide, Julie. I'm so
Oh,
sorry.
no, that and I don't know if I put anything in there, so you're good. Um, and so we went through the House committee. Everything went really well, and it passed unanimously through that committee. I was thrilled. I was like, yes, we're on a roll. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm on a roll. And then they said we need to take it to the Senate Judiciary, Law Enforcement, and Criminal Justice, which is kind of the Senate's representation of the House one. And unfortunately, our senator representative was actually Aaron Osmond. And he said, "You're going to hit backlash in the Senate." And I says, "What does that mean?" I says, "Look at the House. We were able to like go and pull a House representative off the floor and be able to give them our 90 seconds little journey." And he's like, "Yeah." I said, "Well, can I do the same on the Senate?" And Ryan looked at me and said, "Good luck." I says, "What does that mean?" And he said, "Our senators do not come out like our House reps do." And I'm like, "What?" And so we decided after much conversation and talk that we actually pulled it from that committee. And it was not considered by the committee. So again, I'm new to this game, right? I looked at Ryan, I says, "What does that mean?" And he said, we have to take a little bit of a different route. So this bill was then sent actually back to the Senate Rules Committee. It went through whatever it has to go in there because they were going to present it right on the floor. We didn't need the committee. We wanted to present it on the floor. And that's exactly what happened. Ryan and Aaron together presented to the Senate our House Bill 88. And it was very interesting because the conversation was really great. We were able to have senators give their feedback, and it was kind of interesting. I got to actually sit in the background of the Senate chamber, which is kind of a special, unique feeling. And to listen. There was many times I wanted to run out and go, no, but I did not. I contained myself. So how did it show? So this is what these numbers are. Is it goes through a process, right? I'm trying to make this as fast because I want everybody else to hear what everybody else has to say. So it has a process. On the House floor, it's introduced, it's read, then it goes to second reading, then it goes to third reading. It passed and we were then assigned our committee. It then goes back to the House, and the House voted on it. And I'm thrilled to say that it passed unanimously, with except one House rep who was absent that day. So I was now feeling that motion. I was like, yes, okay. We still weren't done. I was like, are you kidding me? And by now the session is halfway over. This is not a process that happens in 24 hours. I wish it did. So it was actually read 3 times on the Senate floor. It was introduced. It was sent to the committee, which we then pulled. It was then sent on the second reading calendar, heard on the floor. There was debate. There was adjustments that were made. There were changes that made. You should know that they actually made a change within the House committee also, to make sure that the wording was correct, that everything was included, that we missed nothing. The Senate then continued to add what they felt was needed to be added. That was agreed upon. And I'm like, okay. And it passed on the floor again unanimously. So I'm like, yes, we're done. Can I tell you, it's like going to the doctor when he tells you, nope, you're still not fully healed. You've got to do this, this, and this. And that's what Ryan told me. Nope, we're not done. I says, why? Because if amended, House and Senate bills must be congruent. So, in other words, whatever changes were made in the Senate House then had to be passed back to the House so they could look at the changes. They could again vote on it. It was sent to what's called the concurrence calendar. It sat there, and within one day it had passed. And it was at that point I realized how close we were. So on March 22nd, which was very close to Aubrey Jo's birthday, it just hit me with that. This bill passed. Can we go to the next slide? Because I know, sorry. The bill had now passed. But what did I get out of it? What did anybody get out of it? It's called relationships. And those need to be built constantly, whether you're lobbying or whether you're advocating or educating. Those have to be built. And for me, Ryan Wilcox. Oh, why did that make me? He continues to work with me on Capitol Hill in all aspects of policy work. He was very instrumental in helping us stop the bill that was brought last year, and the number's gone from my head, but about the flavor vape that they brought back. Okay. His dedication is unwavering to the safety of communities. Thank you. HP 432. Thank you. I knew it was 430 something, but I couldn't remember. And then there's Renee Cowley, who I've actually known since she was 8 years old, and who shows up for me with wisdom and support, whether I need lobbying for custom reform, because I still work in that, So I wear two hats, or even advocating and educating. She gives me so much information. Erin Osmond, who has remained a friend, I get a Christmas card from him every year. And I know if I need help. Kim and Casey have become lifelong friends. We work together on other projects, and they are amazing women. The people that have come into my life have been amazing. Um, and all the incredible legislators who helped move HB 88 forward. Um, I think, is there one more slide, Heidi? I can't remember. No, go back one. I wanted to share with you. So relationships continue to this day. I know I could call on any one of these. And while most of the people that I worked with in 2012 are no longer in the legislature, they are connections that I have to people who are in the legislature. Ryan Wilcox is still there. Unfortunately, Erin is not. Most of them are. Ken Ivory is still there, and he was a huge supporter for us. And I am very grateful to have those connections and to have those moments um, with whatever you want. HB 88 just didn't change policy. It gave me the platform to speak about justice, about children, and about healing. And today, I've been grateful to share that with you all on this webinar. You are now part of this story because you now, while I haven't given you all of it, been given that moment to go, you know what? I can do it. You know what? If I can do it, you can do it because it's a voice that happens. And as a group collectively, a voice is what helps move things and change things. And we have the data, we have the knowledge, we have the ability to educate every single one of these, whether it's with our youth doing it or with our community board, adult caution doing it. I encourage you, don't be afraid. It is scary. It's a big building. When legislature's going and it's loud, it's noisy. You're told you have 90 seconds. Sometimes you're told, okay, you're doing a presentation, you have 5 minutes. And when you get into the presentation, they say, you've got 3 minutes. Adapt. When I write my talk, I have the same talk and I highlight what I can do for 3 minutes or I can do for 5 minutes. So, no, you are now part of this journey that I am on, not with child custody, because then you'd be lobbying, but when it comes to our youth and making them safe. Thank you.
Well, I don't know who decided that I was going to have to follow Julie. Um, that was fantastic, Julie. And Susanna says she'll take the blame. Um, that was so perfect. And I mean, I love the message that you ended with that we can all do this. I was asked to give an example just to kind of illustrate that from a really small thing, really big things can happen. And I agree with you, Julie. We're all like, once you get pulled into this, we all become part of this journey. And it only takes a little bit of education before you have the capability to go and do policy work, even though you might not think that's the case. And I had an interesting experience happen just this weekend. I had my niece with me, and I got a phone call from a policymaker, and so she was in the car with me, and so she listened to this phone call that I had, and afterwards she was asking me who that was, and I said this is a member of the state legislature, and she said, "Is that scary? Like, do you get nervous when you have to talk to somebody like that?" And it was a really interesting question for me to answer because I realized that the answer that I gave to her right now would have been very different from the answer that I would have given her when I first started in this field because I would have been really nervous about it. And now with some experience, but also I think really what it is that experience has helped me understand that A, most of the policymakers that we're working with are not experts in prevention. And even though you might not feel like you're an expert, you are much more of an expert than they are. And two, my experience working with them is that they are all people who typically get into this field because they want to help make positive changes. And so, more often than not, they're very open to listening to what we have to say. And so, it was just kind of interesting for me to experience having to think through how my answer now is very different than it would have been 20 years ago. Um, I was asked to give an example of one of our youth coalitions, and there's a lot of people on this call that were actually much more involved with this than I was. But I'm just going to give you kind of a quick overview of what happened and how it happened. And I think that it kind of goes back to our understanding of this prevention pyramid that you're probably very familiar with, but the very bottom part of that, and it's placed there strategically to show that a majority of what we should be focusing on is primordial prevention, which includes targeting policies that impact health and wellness. And I think that it was because of our understanding of that and our push to really help our community coalitions start to tackle some of these primordial issues, some of these policies that might impact health, that this whole thing came about. The picture that you see here is a picture of the Washington County Youth Coalition. I think these particular kids are all probably graduated and moved on. But at the time, they were the leaders of a youth coalition here in southern Utah. Their advisor had sat down with them and pulled up some national legislation to help them look for things that they could take on as a coalition and try to address. They were also planning on going back to DC and talking to some of our federal policymakers from Utah. And so they just sat down and were looking through some things that might be appropriate for them to address. One of the youth at the time had actually gone online and he had purchased a vape device along with some nicotine oils to go in it. And he had done this as kind of an experiment to see how easy is it for me or for my peers to get these devices and these products if they wanted to. And so he brought that to his advisor and said, "This was so easy. Why? Why is it so easy? I thought that there would be some regulation that would make it more difficult for me to actually access these products." And so they decided to explore that together. The advisor and the youth coalition members, they started looking into it. And they discovered that there was a really interesting loophole. There were bans on flavors and bans on youth access to tobacco products, but the bans that existed did not include synthetics. So if you were using a synthetic nicotine, it wasn't included in that ban, and it meant that retailers had a loophole that they could use to make this a little bit more accessible, a little bit easier for kids to get their hands on. So they went back, they were going back for a conference. While they were there, they went and met with Representative Chris Stewart. And it's interesting to think, but Julie was talking about the importance of relationships. And it's interesting to look at how that had an influence because this particular group of youth had never met Representative Stewart before. But previous iterations of that youth coalition, their predecessors, had been going and having yearly meetings with him. They had met with him in DC. They had invited him to come to their meetings in St. George when they were having those. They had worked with some of his staff that have an office here in southern Utah. And so over years, they had built up this really interesting relationship with him where he knew the name of the Washington County Youth Coalition. He had actually reached out to them to help him when he was drafting some legislation around flavor regulation in previous years. And I think that because of that, when this group showed up, even though they had never met him, he knew who they were, he knew what they were about. He knew that he could trust the work that they were doing. And so they brought this loophole to him and they said, "This is something that we're concerned about. Synthetic nicotine is not included in the national policies, the national laws, and we think that it should be." They put together some information for him on this topic. They gave it to him. And the short version of this story is that he wrote it into legislation, which ended up getting passed on a national level. And the picture that you see here is a screenshot that I took from a news article talking about when the House made this move to ban synthetic nicotine. It said nothing in there about the Washington County Youth Coalition, but we knew that that's where it had come from, that it was through a meeting with him that he had decided to add that piece to this legislation. And I think it's just the perfect example to show that sometimes we think that policy change is too big for us to actually do anything about it. And the truth is, it's not. This came from a group of youth deciding there was something they were concerned about. They did a little bit of research on it and put together some information. They had a meeting with one of their policymakers. And the next thing you know, we have a national ban on synthetic nicotine, very similar to the other regulation around tobacco. So I think the message here is that those relationships are important. As we build them over time, they give us access and resources and opportunities that we wouldn't get otherwise. And sometimes the hardest part about creating change with policy work is just getting started. Once you get started and do it, it tends to be a lot easier than we typically think it's going to be. In some cases, it's just a meeting, a conversation with a policymaker, and the next thing you know, we've got really important policies in place that protect health and wellness of our communities. So anyway, there's that example.
So I'll be fairly quick because I think we could spend a whole webinar just on local ordinances and local policies or practices. And one of the things that I'm here to remind you is that just like Logan's saying, there's sometimes really gets scary when we start talking about federal or even state level policy. But we can do things locally, and sometimes that's a little easier. And it's, when you need a win, this is where you can go. I'm going to use an example that happened a few years ago. After the state legislature passed a bill that was requiring some changes with the Office of Utah State Board of Education and vaping. So the youth electronic marijuana and other drug prevention. I'm totally slaughtering that. Sorry, Mercedes. UMOP, whatever. Anyway, with what Clarissa had at the USBE and what Mercedes had with UMOP, and that's why I was trying not to use the acronyms, but the two of them together, they came up with this kind of breakdown with one of their interns of which schools or which districts did or did not have policy based on vaping. And there was a change, and they had that kind of influence from the top down. But what it gave our communities is that they could go back and say, hey, Ogden School District, we're seeing that this is the current policy. Is this what's really happening? Is this what's going on? It gave you that opportunity to follow up what's going locally. And that was really, really wonderful because it gave me the opportunity with my own district to go, hey, do you really do this? Like, is this what you have happening? And are there barriers? I was just in a meeting, like walked in here, and somebody had put in the chat, hey, how many of you guys are really doing Botvin's life skills? And I was like, ooh, great question to the school districts, because that's something, again, that was top down, but us as local community coalitions can do that follow-up, which creates that local practice, the policies that we want to encourage in our schools. Yes, we do want this to happen, or yes, or no, this is not happening. Those are all things that we can look at. Another example, it comes from, I can't remember, Heidi, if it's Washington County or Iron County, because the Southwest was really on top of it. But they noticed that with the increase in vaping, that they wanted some signs in the parks. Like they did the whole process of what do we need to change? This was something they looked to change. So they have signs in their public parks that there's not to be vaping or smoking in the public parks. That didn't require going to the legislature. It didn't require, like having a huge bill passed. It is about talking to your commissioners and your city councils and seeing what needs to happen locally. So those are all things that you can do. One of the things we've discussed, which we have not fully embarked on, is the access to alcohol at community events. So if you have, like, I'm going to use, I work in Weaver County, so we have Twilight, which is a Twilight concert series. It's fantastic. Well, guess what? How do they, like, what is the policy? What do they allow? How are they checking for IDs? All of these things that I can do that doesn't require again, a state bill, but I can go to the county and the city and say, hey, this is what we're concerned about. This is what we're seeing. Can we change this? And it does require me to build those relationships at my city, at my county, within the schools, within small businesses. Okay. And then you've got the school district policy, the example that I was using, like they have a process of, like, you'll hear them talk about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 violations. That's not the same as tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 for needs for students. Those are two different tier things. But there are going to be times where a student has violated a substance use law on campus. Where do they go? What is it? And do the schools know how to do that? Because there was a lot of confusion with the change of JRI years ago. And so a lot of them were like, well, if it happened on campus, I can't do anything about it. That's not, they were just, there was a lot of just confusion. That's it. Working with them to educate and working with our law enforcement, working with our schools, everyone, that is something, again, that does not require a bill. And the last one that I love to see is when we celebrate. So there may be places that don't sell alcohol or won't allow minors in. Celebrate them, say thank you for maintaining the law, for following the law. It doesn't have to be big. It just could be like a note of saying thank you. We appreciate you not getting a violation or passing your check. It doesn't have to be anything other than that. And those are simple practices that we can do. So again, if you're looking for something for your youth or for your overall coalition, and you're seeing some gaps, maybe things are happening in the parks, things are happening between the schools and on a crosswalk or someplace, work with the cities, work with the counties, see what you can come up with. And thank you, Lindsay, for, I think it was Iron County, because it was Heidi. I just remember Heidi doing it. And probably wasn't just Heidi. Sorry to all my Southwest peeps. I'm sorry. But that's what I have. Back to you, Kiana.
All right. Hello. Oops, sorry. Hi, everyone. I'm Kiana, and I'm obviously having a little bit of tech issues as well, but bear with me. We've got some good information coming along with this, and thank you to Susanna, Julie, and Logan for sharing all of your amazing information. And now I'm here. I'm going to be talking about lobbying versus advocacy versus education, because there have been a couple questions from different UPCA coalitions and groups on, like, hey, we talked about going to Capitol Hill with my supervisor and they got really nervous because it's going on Capitol Hill and they're saying we can't lobby. And there's a lot of questions and a lot of weirdness about that. And so I'm here to talk about this a little bit. As far as some of my background with this, I am running a coalition out of Mill Creek City right now. So my coalition is city affiliated. And so there is a little bit of some guardrails and some guidelines that I do have to follow in working in policy and policy change. But the first thing I do want to say, and I want to repeat, like what Julie said, is you can do it. Even if you are affiliated with a government institution, if you're affiliated with a business or anything, there are things you can do to work in a policy. And I also have to acknowledge on this level as well, this is a very, very gray area of work and of law. And so if you are still confused after, I'm going to be throwing my phone number into the chat. Please, please, please reach out. I'm not saying I know everything about this, but I will say, as part of my background, which allows me to do this, is that I am wonderfully blessed to be working with coworkers who both worked at the Utah State Legislature for a couple of years, so they know a lot of the rules. My city manager used to be a senator, and he knows a lot of the rules, and he's very much believing that coalitions and groups like ours should be on the Hill and should be advocating and should be working with senators. So there is a way, even if your supervisor maybe gets a little worried about this. So let's go into lobbying versus advocacy and education. So I have on the slide the dictionary definitions of what lobbying, advocacy, and educating mean. And now, if you'll notice, they're fairly similar, which is why there's a lot of gray area and why there can be a lot of confusion with this. The best way that I can explain this of why a supervisor might get a little bit freaked out or touchy when you say you're going to be working on the Hill a little bit is that legally, via the IRS, organizations are only allowed to use a specific percentage to pay for lobbying efforts. And so that would be the main reason why a organization supervisor might get a little bit wigged out by you wanting to say, hey, we're going to be going on the Hill with this. But there are some specific like stipulations as far as what lobbying means for it. And so lobbying is very, very specific to what a bill, a certain piece of legislation, and very much specifically working with a senator in that sort of a sense. Your advocacy efforts are mainly, it's a little bit just kind of like broadened out in that sense of saying like, hey, I'm here with this coalition. Yes, we come out of this institution and we're here to talk about what we do and how we work on this. And then educating, it's even kind of a little further out of just like saying, hey, I'm an expert on this or an expert on policy or not policy, but on prevention. And here's what I know about it. And here's what I see in my workplace, and not even kind of like even touching the bill. So those last two things are things you can for sure do. No one can stop you from doing those with it. And a lot of this really, if you're worried about it, it takes just a conversation with a supervisor, with a manager to say like, hey, here's what we're doing and here's how to do it. I'll give you a very specific workaround with this. I wish that I could tell you more about this in the time that we're doing this, but you got to understand like people get college degrees in this subject. Like we're trying to educate you in an hour about something that has hundreds of years of history, lots of precedent, and a lot of different stipulations, and something that's also pretty constantly changing. So if I miss out on some of the information, I apologize. But if you have a manager or someone who's a little bit worried about it, here's what I would say to do. That's probably the best, like the cleanest, most kosher way to get your coalition on the Hill and to make sure your voices are heard. What you need to do is you need to make sure that you are leaning on your coalition members and you are showing up with a coalition member. And what you can do on the Hill, if they're worried about you with what you're going to say, you show up and you just give education in that sense. You just say, I am a expert on prevention. Here's what I see. Here's what I know. Here's the things that we do. And then if we want to make a specific ask with the bill, have your coalition member make the ask in that way, because they're not employed by you for the coalition. That's perfectly kosher. That's perfectly good to do. So that's the easiest workaround that you can present to your supervisor and say, this is what we're doing. And it's not, I'm not going to be lobbying in that sense. And so that's the easiest way I would say to be doing that. And like, again, I said, please, 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 if you are concerned about this, if you have a supervisor concerned or anyone, please reach out. Every one of us have said throughout this whole webinar that relationships are really what drive policy work. And I would say that also will drive our work just even on the ground here. That, I mean, all of this, like the information I just gave you, I didn't know that. Like some of these I got from people that I work with, other connections that I've made with other senators. Like, you do not have to know all of this by yourself. Please reach out. That's what we have this network for. Please reach out for help. Reach out if you are not sure about something and we can figure it out. And don't put too much on yourself to know everything before you go on the Hill. That's what the team is for. And it needs to be done in a team because there's way too, like, the legislative process, the way that we make bills, it's way too big for one person to know. We all have to be working together in that sense. So again, please reach out if you need the help. And that's my little crash course there.
All right, I think I'll do the last word for a quick second. And I put cookies on here because there was a story that went around that have the youth taking cookies to your legislators to build those relationships now, so that the first time you interact with your legislator isn't going to be in January. It should not be in January. It should be now, building that relationship. And maybe the youth are the ones dropping it off because they'll remember the youth, but having the coordinator or an adult there is always good because you'll probably be the consistent. But build those relationships. This means inviting them to your trainings, inviting them to your meetings, inviting them to be a part of like a kickoff event. Those are all things that we love to see and they love to be recognized for. Everyone loves to hear, hey, we really appreciate the hard work you're doing. I don't care if you're like, no, I don't want to be in public. That's fine, but it's still getting a certificate or a thank you note. Everyone loves to hear it. So do that. Send a thank you note to the businesses that are making sure that they're following up with the SINAR compliance. Make sure you're doing a thank you note to those who are passing their easy compliance checks. Maybe they've got a new pub or a bar and they are really, really stringent about checking IDs. Say thank you. We want you to continue to do that. We know it's September. Set up a calendar now. I sat down, I think last April, after the session, working with our health department and their governing youth council to set up a reasonable calendar for when youth can get educated on the policies that are available, when they can start going to meet with people, when they would go to different trainings to understand things. But set up a calendar so you can say you're on top of these things rather than, hey, you had a great webinar, let's go start doing it now. You should still do it now anyway, but be more intentional. And then following up, one of the things that I really love that Julie mentioned is that Ryan Wilcox, he actually left the legislature and worked for a senator at the level, like the federal level, and then he came back. And so when he came back, Julie was interacting with him then. Like it was just a nice relationship. And I have to say that when we walked up to him and she made a comment, I said, just so you know, I didn't say that comment. It was a very familiar term and very snarky comment that she made to a representative. And I was just like, just so you know, I did not say that. But that was the relationship she has built with Ryan. And then again, always say thank you. And please, please, please use the research and science. We have spent decades trying to move prevention away from just one thing where everyone's like, oh, well, it feels really good. We're going to do this. We want to continue that. We want to make sure that we're using the science and using the evidence to show that what we're doing is effective. To answer Kimberly's question, they have not actually released a list of the different bills yet. And as far as public health is concerned, I don't know about suicide, but as far as public health is concerned, we do know that there will be a proximity discussion in relationship to alcohol and some of the entertainment districts. But that's just, again, the omnibus bill is going to have that. I believe that the vaping one is set. Jill Parker had mentioned she didn't think there was anything new coming there. And we're looking at doing some stuff with the beer tax language, not changing the funding amounts or anything like that, or where they go, just making sure that it's getting spent. And the other one that I have been working with Representative Peterson about that we'll be discussing as it gets closer is a signage for alcohol or establishments that sell alcohol, whether it's on premise or off premise, that state that it does cause cancer. The alcohol products have been known to cause cancer through consumption, similar to what you see with tobacco. So those are the ones we have here so far. I don't know about suicide prevention though, Kim.
Can I just say they also started a discussion about kratom?
Oh, that's right. Thank you. I forgot that one.
No, you could. They started that discussion to see how we move forward with that. They are getting some data, small amounts of data, and some concerns. And so they had just a discussion last month on how they move forward. There was some really great discussions that were had. And so I'm not sure where they're taking it yet, but they do have their concerns. They feel like it's reached the point where spice was when spice became a problem. And they had people there that have experienced death because of kratom in their families. So um, just to give you that heads up on that one, I haven't seen anything else either. So
And Julie's, oh, Kimberly, I'd love to. It's a great question, Kimberly. But these are all things we can totally take, Julie can take and discuss with us. But she's been going to the Capitol in the interim sessions and listening to the Kratom discussion, which is phenomenal. And I appreciate her doing that. Any other questions? Let me rephrase it. What questions do you all have now? So you're all going to go out and you're going to start doing all these things. Yes. You're all going to go start doing policy and education and advocacy. Real quick, do we need another more in-depth conversation about any policy, specifically about advocacy and education? Or big P, little p, like let us know what you need so that Julie can share her story like that. And Julie, I was crying. I adore every time, and you guys may not know this, but 2 years ago she shared her story, and I was in DC listening to her present at this session, and I started crying then too, because she's been a really phenomenal advocate for us with prevention. How do we file a toxin kratom? I believe it's with Health and Human Services. Was it with Health and Human Services or was it the Business and Labor? You're
Now I can't
muted,
remember.
Julie. What you were muted?
sorry, it was with business and labor.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes we get those things. So Tanya, Business and Labor Committee, you can go in there and we can you can ask to be informed when they have their interim meetings, and then you can get their transcripts and the audio file sent to you. So
Awesome. Does
that's
anyone else have any questions for any of our speakers? Okay. Well, I just wanted to give a quick plug for next month's webinar. We're going to be hearing from Katie Reed from R&R Partners. She's going to give us a heads up on what kind of parents empowered collateral that we're going to be seeing in the next batch that gets sent out, and give us some ideas on how you can mobilize your coalitions and your communities for Parents Empowered Month in January. And then in November, we are also going to focus on policy to get you guys ready for the legislative session. Probably a breakdown of the legislative process and whatever else you feel like you need. So we'll make sure to send out an email to get more feedback from you on that. But thank you again so much to Julie, Logan, Susanna, and Kiana for presenting today. This was an awesome presentation, awesome webinar. One last chance for questions. I don't know if you guys are anything like me, but I'll get my best questions as I'm drifting off to sleep tonight. So I will make sure to include everyone's contact information in the email that we send out. And that way, if tonight you think of a question and you want to reach out, you'll have their contact information. So thanks everyone so much for tuning in. Thanks to our presenters, and we'll see you next month, and then hopefully at Fall Conference in PopCon. Thanks, everybody.